Hello everybody, I hope you're well. Just a few disclaimers before we get into this chilled review of The Substance. Number one, trigger warning, there's going to be blood. There's going to be blood and there's going to be needles. The blood clips have been turned black and white, just for your discretion. But there is blood nonetheless, and there's going to be some appearance of needles. Number two, the director of The Substance, I call her Caroline Farget for this entire video. It's actually Coralie Farget, completely my mistake on that one. And number three is enjoy the video. I hope you guys like it. Please let me know if you want any more sort of laid back reviews. And yeah, enjoy. Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. The feminist body horror The Substance has been causing quite a stir recently. The film follows Elizabeth Sparkle, Demi Moore, as she gets fired from her aerobics show in lieu of a younger, hotter woman. She in turn begins to take The Substance, where a younger, hotter version of herself, Sue, Margaret Qualley, is born and chaos ensues. It's a commentary on ageism in Hollywood, gendered power structures, and of course beauty. As you guys can imagine, this is my absolute bread and butter, so of course I had to watch it and also make a review for you guys. The Substance from wider audiences was received fairly positively, but I have seen murmurings and very interesting takes and critiques on this film, which I wanted to speak about in today's video, along the lines of hagsploitation and ageism. Did this film truly tackle ageism, or did it just play into the tropes of ageism itself? This is going to be a little bit more of a laid back video from me. I'm not going full video essay analysis. Hagsploitation and ageism are, not only is ageism something that I've covered so many times on my channel, but these are very hefty subject matters, and I honestly just wanted to do a little review on The Substance. So treat this video almost like a podcast episode. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and enjoy. And just before we get into it, I would love to thank Lalo for sponsoring today's video. Lalo are one of my favorite luxury sexual wellness brands, and by luxury I mean luxury, and that is one of my favorite things about Lalo, is everything always feels so luxurious, not just in the look of their products but also in the new technology they use as well. I've worked with Lalo so many times before, and I will continue to work with them because not only do I love working with them as a brand and everything they stand for, but I also absolutely love their products. Lalo wanted me to show you guys their new Enigma Double Sonic. Not only does this vibrator have sensonic technology for external stimulation, which doesn't make direct contact but is still really effective without being too overwhelming, but this toy also has an ergonic internal stimulator which can get to hard to reach places, and this toy can be app connected. Yes, we will be having robots by 2025. You can unlock 2 additional modes via the app and fully customize your experience. There really is something for everyone when it comes to Lalo. Luxury, yeah, luxury. And for the first time ever, the Enigma Double Sonic will be on sale for Black Friday, and official discounts will be available from the 31st of October, but Lalo have very kindly given you guys a code. If you use the code JT15, that's JT15, you can access these discounts early. So make sure you click the link in the description below and use the code JT15 to access Lalo's Black Friday discount codes early. Thank you so much again, Lalo, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get into it. Something which really struck me on my first watch of The Substance is the significance of casting Demi Moore as Elizabeth Sparkle, a once great actress who is wrongfully fired from her fitness show on her 50th birthday for essentially being too old and haggard. Out with the old, in with the new, etc. And I think we all know about Hollywood's ageism problem here, and specifically how that ageism problem impacts women, because Hollywood is very much still a man's world. Unfortunately, women's roles in Hollywood are reduced to either a romantic interest of a male or acting alongside a man. Maggie Gyllenhaal was told she was too old to play the love interest of a 55-year-old when she was 37. Olivia Wilde at the age of 28 was told she was too old to play Naomi from The Wolf of Wall Street. The part then went to a then 21-year-old Margot Robbie. Gina Davis said a certain male actor that was making a movie said that I was too old to be his romantic interest and I was 20 years younger than him. Janie Dembo shared on Twitter, I was just in informed that at the age of 43, I am too old to play the wife of a 57-year-old. Emma Thompson was told she was too old to play the love interest of Hugh Grant in Sense and Sensibility, despite Hugh only being a couple years younger than her. And Elizabeth Banks screen tested for Mary Jane Watson when she was 28, but was subsequently turned down because she was too old, despite Tobey Maguire being 26. Women age out of roles, meanwhile men just age. And I don't think there is a better example for ageism in Hollywood than Demi Moore. At the peak of her career in the 80s and 90s, Demi Moore was an absolute powerhouse. She was the world's highest paid actress by 1995, and in 1996 was paid the highest paycheck of any actress, $12.5 million for striptease. Her career never quite reached the same heights. She did go on hiatus for around 6 years to raise her children, and she had a sort of like alleged string of unsuccessful movies. But during this, I'd hate to say flop era, but during this flop era, she did still have some critically acclaimed and successful work, like If These Walls Could Talk, G.I. Jane, and Passion of Mind. Little side note here, but I do feel like actresses are punished more for having unsuccessful films than actors. I watched a TikTok recently. I can't remember her username, but I'm going to put her username on the screen and link the TikTok down below. But she pointed out that Adam Driver, who is a very talented actor, don't get me wrong, I really, really enjoyed his performance in Girls. Seemingly, he isn't leading man material. He can't get bums into seats. He has had a very big string of unsuccessful films, yet he still continues to be cast as a leading man. And I think that actresses are held to a higher standard. And like, not only this, but Demi Moore was one of many actresses who had a quote unquote diva reputation and was nicknamed Gimme More for turning down roles which didn't meet her salary demands. And I think that the ageism and misogyny that Demi Moore faced was further exacerbated by her relationship with Ashton Kutcher. I remember this relationship being really scandalized at the time. My mum read a lot of tabloids, so I in turn would read them as well. And it's no wonder that like I'm so into pop culture now as an adult. And Demi Moore was essentially painted as this man-eating cougar, and Ashton Kutcher was only 13 years younger than her. When they began dating, he was 30 and she was 43. And after they broke up, their relationship was sort of, referred to quite flippantly. Like, Demi Moore can't keep her younger man in check. But Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher were married for 7 years. And once again, so many high-profile actors were in relationships with women that were much younger than them, but that didn't make the headlines at all, and it wasn't scandalized at all. So if we just circle back to the substance, Demi Moore's age has absolutely impacted her career and the way she was treated by the press and the public as a whole. I honestly couldn't have thought of someone better to play Elizabeth Sparkle, and in the first scene, I was absolutely taken aback by how beautiful Demi Moore looked. And I've seen a lot of people be quite critical of Demi Moore being cast in this role because she is so beautiful. I've seen people argue that it should have been someone who was more conventionally unattractive, but personally I actually really like the fact that Demi Moore was cast in this role and that she's so beautiful, because not only does it invoke that sort of like want to put your arms through the camera and shake her kind of response, I also think it accurately depicts the pervasiveness of modern day beauty standards, specifically the pervasiveness of beauty standards within an industry like Hollywood, where as a woman everything relies on the balance of your physical appearance. But also maybe it will make us look inwards. Maybe we should treat ourselves and afford ourselves the same consideration and gentility that we afford to other people. I really loved Margaret Qualley as Sue, Elizabeth's younger and hotter substance creation. I even like the fact that she was called Sue. She didn't have a real name like Elizabeth Sparkle, which is obviously absolutely a fake name, but you know what I mean. Because Sue isn't even a human. She's a creation. Sue, it's one syllable. It slides off the tongue. It's easy to remember. It's also extremely common. You can almost apply and project any sort of idea you have onto that person. You can almost mold and morph them into the woman that you want them to be. I know that Caroline Farget said in an interview, she chose the name Sue because it reminded her sort of a little bit of a pin-up doll. Sue is nothing more than a fantasy. She is genetically modified to look perfect, and that is it. it. And most likely when Sue is introducing herself to someone, they probably aren't listening to a word she's saying. Don't get me wrong, Margaret Qualley is absolutely beautiful, but they even really had to glam Margaret Qualley up to turn her into this perfect being. Obviously, there was a makeup artist on set, she has a full head of extensions in, and she has prosthetic boobs on. To quote Margaret Qualley for the Sunday Times, unfortunately, there is no magic boob potion, so we had to glue those on. Coralie found an incredible prosthetics team to endow me with the rack of a lifetime, just not my lifetime. I find the casting of Dennis Quaid as Harvey a very interesting decision. Firstly, I don't think it's a coincidence that the main executive pig of the film is called Harvey. This role was originally supposed to go to Ray Liotta, but he passed away. And Dennis Quaid is a fairly controversial figure, to say the least. He's one of those celebrities that has a political views segment on their Wikipedia. But Dennis Quaid has been a very vocal Donald Trump supporter for years. He recently endorsed him in the upcoming election. And a part of me does think maybe this casting was intentional. Maybe let's get a misogynist to play a misogynist. But at the end of the day, Dennis Quaid is being paid to be in this feminist body horror. And I feel like lining the pocket of a misogynist, even if you are doing it in a self-aware way, doesn't really align with the messaging of the film. And sorry, but do you think Dennis Quaid actually understands what the film is about? Do you reckon he actually knows what's going on? The Substance is a body horror, a subgenre of horror that focuses on the unnatural or grotesque transformation, destruction, or degeneration of the human body or other creatures. If I could recommend anything in this video, it's to go and watch this film in the cinema. The best way to describe it is completely invasive. The visual effects are incredible. Nearly everything in the film is done practically. And because the practical effects and prosthetics took such a long time to make and then apply, often the scenes were filmed in chunks of 3 with the actors, then with body doubles, and then in a lab. And then essentially everything was pieced together, which I think is super, super interesting. The Substance was actually shot in France. Both Caroline Faget and cinematographer Benjamin Kraken wanted to create the feel of LA without directly replicating it. So the film features iconic LA features like the stars on the Walk of Fame, palm trees, the gorgeous weather. And I do think this sanitized and almost glamorous setting makes the film even more jarring to watch because none of the horror is hidden in the darkness. Or there are some scenes, but it all comes out in the light. Like I found myself shielding my eyes from the sunlight, similarly to how Elizabeth was. Like that's bestie. The really colorful cinematography, the bright settings, the gore, the sound design, which blasts every squelching noise into your eardrums completely unforgivingly. And something which I found really interesting whilst researching this video is that of the 150-page script, which by the way, The Substance won Best Screenplay at Cannes. Sorry, this reminds me of This reminds me of my friend Alfie. He was trying to convince me to watch Triangle of Sadness, which I have watched. He went, Jordan, it won the Palme d'Or. It's this really reputable award from Cannes Film Festival. And I was like, I know what the Palme d'Or is, Alfie. Thank you. I thought you guys would like that one. But what I found out whilst researching for this video is that of the 150-page script, there were only 20 pages of dialogue. And I do think that the simplicity and almost like the stripped backness, the dialogue being stripped back really did hammer home the gore, and it really helps you focus on the visuals and what's going on in front of you. But perhaps more layered dialogue would have sent a more clear message, but this is something which we're going to circle back to when we start talking about the critiques. Sit down. The body horror and the sound design made for a really intense viewing experience. I watched this for the first time in the cinema, and I would highly recommend it because you can't pause it, you can't take a break. It is so intense. There were multiple times I was in the cinema with my head buried between my legs and my hands over my ears. And I think because of this, what I will say is that when I watched this in the cinema, this film feels really long because you can't take any breaks and because it is just so intense and it's pulling so many reactions from your body that it's just a bit exhausting. So I will say, and again, Disclaimer, I have ADHD. Disclaimer, I do have ADHD, so it could have just been an attention thing, but I was getting quite restless towards the end. I was actually gagging to leave that cinema. And of course, the gore was executed so well. Did I enjoy it? Absolutely not. I'm actually an incredibly squeamish person, so you can imagine that this was the experience from hell. You know, the sheer like mass and intensity of the gore, especially now knowing that nearly everything was done with practical effects, it's really, really impressive. But what I am going to say is I do think that this film really shines in scenes which are absent of gore. Yes, I am going to talk about the scene where Elizabeth is getting ready for her date, because how can I not? I don't even think I can put into words how brilliant I think this scene is. Elizabeth is getting ready to go on a date and she keeps flitting to and from the mirror, trying to leave, then changing things, adding different makeup, changing her outfit, to the point where she begins growing more and more angry and raging, and inevitably just starts rubbing and smudging her makeup all over her face and doesn't leave the house. I don't think I've ever watched a scene which accurately portrays the anger of hating your physical appearance. I think the media tends to portray insecure people as sad and meek and timid, when in my personal experience, hating your physical appearance is just a rageful endeavor. Hating your physical appearance means hating your physical appearance. This doesn't happen all that much anymore, but a few years ago, I was really, really insecure about the way that I looked, and I have honestly lost track of the amount of times that I have angrily scrubbed my makeup off my face, brushed my hair so hard that I've pulled parts out, thrown makeup brushes at the mirror, tried so hard to not let the angry tears flow. And even now, when something with, you know, my getting ready process isn't going to plan, the first emotion that I feel isn't sadness, it's anger. And if we just stay on the themes of the substance, something that I really, really enjoyed about this film is I think that it really accurately portrayed protecting patriarchy when it benefits you. Before her firing, Elizabeth is very happily reaping the benefits of being a beautiful woman under patriarchy. She had her own show, she made millions of dollars, and clearly had a very fruitful career. And although Sue's workout show is so clearly very hypersexualized, like, what working out is this girl doing, please? But, you know, Elizabeth's workout show, some people could argue that that is sexualized in some kind of way as well. It was just sexualized in an 80s way. Elizabeth was more than happy to reap these benefits, that when she is fired, she never critiques the system, but instead essentially blames herself and changes herself to fit into this system yet again. And Sue is more than happy to abuse the substance and harm another woman in the process to continue reaping these benefits. And that's what complacency in patriarchy really is. Another really interesting point one of my friends told me, I'm pretty sure they read it on Twitter, but I don't know the source, so if you do, please leave a comment. But essentially, the substance also mirrors how young people abuse their bodies, but they don't care because it's not today's problem. It's a problem for their older selves. Think about all of the sugar and unhealthy food we consume. Think about the alcohol we drink, the cigarettes we smoke, all the times that we don't wear sunscreen, the really loud music that we blast in our ears. We know that this is bad for us, but we continue to do it anyway because these problems won't set in for another 20 years or so. And despite you and your older self being one, they're so far away from you that you feel like they are a completely different person. But it is very clear to me that the standout theme of the substance is the pursuit of beauty making you uglier. Now, this is a topic that I find really interesting. I've covered it on this channel before, but in her desperate pursuit of beauty and youth, Elizabeth essentially mutilates her own body. By mutilates it, I'm talking splitting her back open. I think we're beginning to have more conversations about botched plastic surgery, especially in, you know, post filler and plastic surgery boom, the BBL body, Instagram face, etc. Young women are beginning to share their stories and talk about the irreversible damage that has been done to their bodies in the pursuit of beauty, and the cruel irony of making yourself look worse when you're trying to make yourself look better. I do think that it is an objective good that there is a film covering this phenomenon, especially a film that's had such mainstream success and it's triggered so many interesting conversations and it's really brought this topic to the forefront. But did the substance tackle this subject matter well? That's what we're going to start talking about now. I feel really conflicted when it comes to critiques of the substance because I still really enjoyed this film. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd, but I find myself not disagreeing with the critiques. I completely understand where people are coming from. This film is very clearly supposed to be satirical. A lot of the content in the film is very much up for interpretation, which I think it's relying quite heavily on the viewer to interpret it through a feminist lens, which is a lot to ask of people. So making a film with hagsploitation and ageist tropes can potentially reinforce rather than combat. I agree and disagree on the take that the substance is surface level. It's definitely very on the nose, but I don't think that on the nose is necessarily a bad thing. This is one of the first films that I've seen enter the mainstream with a focus on beauty standards and ageism. I think any film which focuses on this subject matter is going to be a win. And now that conversations have been triggered and films around this subject matter are making money and achieving critical acclaim and success, now more media around this subject is going to be made with different stances and takes. So I just think it's a win-win either way. I do think that the dialogue being really stripped back plays into the satirical elements of the film, and it does let the body horror really shine and the practical effects really shine as well. And as I've said, this is a really, really intense watching experience, especially if you watch it in the cinema. So I think if there was a lot of dialogue, I wouldn't have been able to focus on it. I think that perhaps the stripped back dialogue was factoring in the amount of people that were going to be watching this film with their ears covered. But in turn, I do think that this can make the film feel a little shallow. And what I mean by that is that we don't find out anything about Elizabeth at all. She almost doesn't really feel like a fully fleshed out character, despite her being only one of 3 main characters. Again, clearly it's a caricature, it's very satirical of someone who her entire life has been her job and her career and her physical appearance, hence why she goes to such extreme lengths to maintain this physical appearance. But I think that this film would have had some extra emotional depth if we got to find out more about Elizabeth. And as I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite scenes in this film, and a scene which I found really emotional, was the scene when she was getting ready to go on her date. And that's a scene which is completely devoid of any body horror. But if we stay on the topic of body horror for just a moment, I read a really interesting critique on Wallpaper titled "The substance may be grotesque, but it is not body horror." I honestly don't watch enough horror movies to be an authority on what is considered body horror or not. And in fact, watching The Substance may have put me off watching any body horror for the rest of my life. But this article does argue that body horror isn't just about gore and grotesqueries. Body horror is much more than just manipulated gore designed to evoke disgust. In fact, it contains curiosities about the body that differs from horror's usual rubbernecking. Despite attempts at a critique on ageism, Farget's abject treatment on the body and reliance on hagsploitation cliches, alongside a lack of interiority for Elizabeth or Sue, who spend their days in front of the TV or seeking male attention, makes for a raucous depiction of womanhood. If you haven't watched the film, there are some spoilers ahead, but when Sue begins abusing the substance and using it longer than the 7 days advised, the effects physically manifest themselves in Elizabeth. Think the picture of Dorian Gray if he slayed. That was a joke, by the way, because me and editor Kath went to see Sarah Snook's one-woman show of the picture of Dorian Gray, and it was amazing. A spiritual experience, in fact. She lived, she served, and then she died. And the way these side effects manifest is by aging Elizabeth. At first, she has a wrinkled and crony finger, and then the rest of her skin wrinkles, her hair turns grey and dry, her bones begin dislocating out of their sockets. And when Elizabeth and Sue begin to have even more conflict, Sue abuses the substance for months, which leaves Elizabeth completely unrecognizable from her former self. And this is where the potential hagsploitation comes in. Hagsploitation, which is also known as psychobiddy films, are horrors or thrillers primarily involving aging women who have grown mentally unbalanced or violent. And this is where I begin to feel a little bit conflicted when it comes to The Substance. Yes, the film is clearly very satirical. Yes, it's very clear to me that Elizabeth isn't the villain in this film. Yes, the aging process is very exaggerated towards the end. In the end, Elizabeth doesn't even have a body. But the film still uses aging features like wrinkles, grey hair, hair loss, sagginess for shock value and horror, right? And this is what gets me, because the shock and horror of these aging features is often used alongside or in conjunction with actual gore, almost implying that they are one and the same, because it goes without saying that there is nothing horrific about having wrinkles or grey hair. But I don't think that the hagsploitation trope would be anywhere near as impactful as if it was done on a man, for example. You know, if we think about Jack Nicholson hugging the old lady in the bathtub in The Shining, the character of Moira in the first season of American Horror Story, and Mia Goth playing both Maxine and Pearl in X, would we find these reveals anywhere near as shocking if the characters were men? Probably not. And this is where the substance begins to lose me a little bit, because especially on a second rewatch, I noticed how much the camera leers over Margaret Qualley's flawless and perky body, and then the very cold and hard angles used on Elizabeth's. And don't get me wrong, I really liked the pump it up with Sue scenes. I thought they were so funny. They were clearly very satirical. I thought it really, really worked. But I do feel that Elizabeth is not afforded this same grace, perhaps. Yes, the film is a commentary on ageism, but I do think it's worth noting when commentary on ageism begins to swing around to becoming ageist. But also I would like to say that I do think that this is kind of the sign of a good film, when it really does make you question what you just watched. I don't know, I really like the fact that they really went all out and really, really pushed the limits. Now, I have seen a few interesting critiques of who are we supposed to be laughing at in this film, / who is the person who is punished? You know, who is for this sort of shallow pursuit of beauty, right? And again, this is an element of the film that's very clearly up for interpretation. Yes, this film is very funny, but I never felt like Elizabeth or Sue were villains in this film. I was really rooting for Elizabeth. Also, it was really nice to see female rage featuring an older protagonist. I want Elizabeth dragging Sue across the floor in everyone's feminine rage compilations from now on. And it is very clear to me that the villains of the film are the men, and specifically Harvey. Every shot of them features their yellowing teeth, food around their mouth, their sweat, their leering eyes and bulging veins. Every shot of Harvey is deeply unsympathetic and unflattering. He is very clearly the villain of the story. Not Elizabeth, not Sue, and certainly not Monstro Eliza Sue. But an even more interesting question to raise is who is really punished for this shallow pursuit of beauty? Because it's very clear to me that the substance is supposed to be commentary on the pursuit of beauty making you uglier, as I mentioned earlier. And although, yes, Harvey is punished, his New Year's Eve show goes tits up, to say the least, in front of all of the shareholders. But is he punished more than Monstro Eliza Sue? Absolutely not, because she literally explodes. Elizabeth is left without a body and then disintegrates. But it is worth noting that Caroline Faget said in an interview that Elizabeth is at her happiest when she no longer has a body, when she is completely devoid of a body. But if we just circle back to this idea of who is really punished, but you could argue that Elizabeth being essentially the one who is punished the most for this pursuit of beauty, not only can act almost as a warning to women, like a cautionary tale, but also it is reflective of the reality of the situation. When women's bodies are mutilated through botched plastic surgery because of this crushing pressure to conform to conventional beauty standards, they are the ones who are punished the most, because they have to live in those bodies for the rest of their lives. It's not the people around them who were potentially mean about their physical appearance. It's certainly not the mostly male plastic surgeons. It's a pretty harsh messaging, but it is rooted in truth, in my opinion. The substance is a feminist body horror. It's not a feminist revenge body horror. I read another critique on The Cut, which I found really interesting, and I wanted to discuss it with you guys. Emily Gould argues, yes, the movie is clearly using maximalism and shock value to make its points, but the price of being thrilled by the substance is accepting wholesale that a woman would be willing to give up her life 7 days at a time to permit a version of her young, beautiful self to parade around the world in her steed. The two selves don't share a mind, so the old self must sit around and watch TV while the new self paints the town. Why, I wonder, dumbfounded. Would anyone make that bargain? My inability to suspend my belief may be in part because Demi Moore, who plays faded star Elizabeth Sparkle, is one of the most beautiful 62-year-olds on the planet. If you're already fairly perfect, why sacrifice everything to allow a glistening Margaret Qualley to burst forth from your spinal column? Now, I will say that I do actually disagree with this critique, because Elizabeth Sparkle is someone whose entire career has been resting on the balance of her maintaining her physical appearance. And as we see in the film, Elizabeth has no other life outside of her career, probably because she doesn't want to. She wants all of the external validation that her career has given her. The only reason that she rings up Fred to go on that date is because he compliments her physical appearance, and she doesn't have any more of that validation since losing her job. Although The Substance is an extreme example of the lengths that women will go to maintain their physical appearance and maintain the look of youth, I don't think it's unrealistic at all. Women every single day risk their lives getting different plastic surgeries, going on different medications to try and lose weight. And Caroline Fajit wrote this film 5 years ago. A lot of people think that The Substance is almost a stand-in for Ozempic, but Caroline wrote this before Ozempic really entered the cultural zeitgeist, and she said that it wasn't based on that. But as you can tell, the fact that this, substance this substance can be essentially a stand-in for any sort of beauty procedure really hammers home the pervasiveness of this industry. Now, what I am going to finish this video on is a personal critique of mine, which I do think does circle back to perhaps this critique about the fact that it seems unrealistic that Demi Moore's character would just sit inside all day whilst she lets a younger version of herself run around because they don't even share the same mind. This is something which I didn't really understand about the film, and I want you guys to help me out here. The split personalities thing really confused me, and that's my truth. I know that you're supposed to remember you are one, and I remember when Margaret Qualley first bursts out, I assumed that it was Elizabeth's conscious in Sue. And I assumed that for the first half of the film. But then as soon as they started having conflict and it all started kicking off between them, then I was like, okay, no, they don't have the same mind anymore. Did they develop a split personality disorder? I don't really understand what's going on. And that's sort of my truth on that one. Definitely not a huge hiccup, but definitely something that I would have liked some clarification on. Overall, I do think that the ending went all out, and you can feel the rage in the ending, and that's something that I really appreciate. And I thought, for lack of a better word, I thought it was really cool. You could feel Fajit's anger towards the industry in this final scene. It's all sort of built up and amalgamated in this scene. But I will say, I do think I was left feeling a little unsatisfied, and I don't know whether it's just because I'm not really a horror person, or I don't really know whether this is just because I'm an optimist, but I would have loved to have seen Demi Moore's character live a happy life as an old lady. That's my truth. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Just a little casual chill review. It's actually my birthday this month, so I've been celebrating a lot, but we have 4 videos coming up before the end of the year, which I'm so excited to get out to you guys. Yes, I've got a proper video essay coming in a few weeks. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please let me know what you thought of this film, because I know that this is so controversial, and I know that so many people have so many different takes, so I would love to hear it. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you soon for another video. Bye!